You have not committed this crime. Malvanius seemed to study him a lot more closely all of a sudden and continued, but the fact that you were trying to run away meant that you judge yourself unworthy of being in my presence, unworthy of being innocent. I haven't done anything, sir. I was just scared, that's all. I promise, that's all. Malvanius laughed. Scared? You don't know the meaning of the word. As the other witch hunter began to bind the man's hands together behind his back with rope. The place that you're being taken will teach you what fear is. There's something I don't like about you. You may not be guilty of a crime yet, but I want to find out what it is that lies deep inside you, that is worried it might commit some foul deed in the future. Get him out of my sight. With that, the man was promptly gagged and hooded, then removed from the inn and taken straight to a waiting coach outside, which hastily rode off. The others in the bar looked even more nervous, not wanting to speak out of turn here, not wanting to speak at all. Tordrad was already sitting downstairs nursing a hangover and watching proceedings evolve in front of him. The soldier in him made him keep short hours aside for sleep. He stood out as different here, being a foreigner. This could get ugly, he thought, especially as he could not speak Reichspiel. Malvanius had looked at everyone once, but had not looked at everyone twice. Yet. The imposing figure of a man moved across to the bar and stood waiting expectantly before the barman. "Well?" he asked, eventually, tired of waiting. The barman seemed scared and confused and answered, You want a drink? At this moment it occurred to Tordrad that the barman looked a bit like a dwarf. He was clearly human, that much was obvious from his 6 feet of height, but he seemed to remind Tordrad of an overgrown dwarf. "A drink," came the witch hunter's reply. "You seek to pervert the course of justice by plying my good mind with the devil's lament. What do you have to hide?"
Nothing, sir," came the barman's reply. "You just seemed to want something, so naturally I assumed, this being a bar."
"This is no bar," the witch hunter replied. "This is a den of dark desires and sin. Not only that, but you have the gall to display it in plain sight for all the people of the city to see. You disgust me." The barman thought about this for a moment and plucked up the courage to speak.
Sorry you don't approve of the name, sir. I'm happy to change it if that is your wish, but I'm also ready to help you in whatever investigation you're involved in."
"I was waiting for you to tell me about the murder. What do you know of it?"
"Murder? I don't know nothing of any murder. When?"
Malvanius pointed his sword towards the barman's throat. "I was hoping you could tell me. Tell me anything you can and I'll be out of your way and on to someone else." The barman knew that this was a possibility for an easy way out. He had no idea about a murder, but the potential for escape from its coming interrogation was an attractive proposition. However, if he made something up, he knew he'd be lying. It was never a good idea to lie to witch hunters, in any situation. His grandpa had taught him that. Those were his dying words when a witch hunter put a sword through him all those years ago, funnily enough. The barman stuck to his guns and didn't lie. He answered,
"I honestly know nothing of a new murder round here."
The witch hunter nodded in some satisfaction at this. He had baited a trap for the man. No one inside the building should know of the murders yet, and if this oaf had taken the easy way out, he would have been admitting to being in on it. "I still don't like you. You'll still need investigating, but I sense the truth in you at least. That means that whatever other sick thing you're hiding will be found out all the faster while we look in the right direction." The room was beginning to fill up with a squad of witch hunters. They wore the common city colours of the Altdorf Order's watch, but Malvanius's garb was a mix of the usual dark tones along with bits of blue colouring, linings and trimmings. Then, of course, there was the rank insignia he wore upon the chest of his long leather jacket. Finally, there was the blue band he wore around his hat. One of the witch hunters that entered had the white-robed woman from last night held firmly between his 2 hands. Malvanius looked around with a disturbingly pleased look upon his face. His subordinate let the woman go with the slightest, almost unperceivable nod of their leader's head. Lysandria rubbed her arms where she'd been roughly escorted here, dragged out of her bed in the middle of the night. Her hair was not in a bun like before, but down and in a dishevelled mess. Tordrad privately thought to himself how disgusting this treatment was, but he was not shocked by it. His homeland of Kislev also had witch hunters in it. It was a small blessing that he didn't understand most of what the Tall One, their leader, was saying to the poor girl now, or he might have lost his calm and freed her forcefully. Or tried. It was at that moment that Maestro came downstairs eating an apple. He saw the crowd of worried patrons' faces and said in a friendly manner,
"Oh gosh, is there some fun to be had this morning?"
Malvanius's eyes narrowed as he looked upon the man. He looked deep into his eyes, even from such a distance away as he was, and perceived something about them. They were grey, but in their outline was a ring of purple, most unusual for a normal noble dressed as he obviously was, for anyone in fact. He considered the possibility of stigmata and pondered upon it internally, while outwardly he maintained his presence to the newcomer. "Is it tainted?" was all he asked the newcomer. Maestro was chewing quite a mouthful of apple, and held up the fruit in his hand.
"I hope not. I've eaten half of it already. I don't see any maggots."
"Not the apple, you imbecile! The path you walk that brings you into my gaze!"
"The stairwell?"
Maestro began nervously, looking at the stairs he stood upon in case of woodworm. Malvanius saw that this was genuine, and began to get a little flustered. He quickly calmed himself. It had been a while since someone had got to him like this. Tordrad's palm was already over his face. As Maestro's bodyguard, it was his duty to protect the man no matter what happened. He didn't fancy the man's silly manner getting him killed from being pulled into an unwinnable fight before they'd even set off on their trip. The witch hunter would often attempt to give people the merest suggestion of a question and let them fill in the rest of the gaps for him, usually out of nervousness. It was a technique that normally worked on the general populace, but not on these fools. He took a long look at the Kislevite, but before he could speak he was interrupted by Maestro from behind.
"Excuse me. Yes, he's with me. He's my bodyguard. Yes."
Malvanius didn't turn around. He simply asked, "What concern is that of yours? For what I wish to say to him. You don't speak for him, do you?" Maestro replied instantly with the chirpy spirit of a student, even though his age didn't fit the temperament.
"Well, nobody does. He can't speak a word of Reichspiel."
Malvanius felt his eye twitch. That was a bad sign. The situation was beginning to irritate him, to affect his pragmatic, investigative mind. He uttered to himself a saying in the long-dead classical tongue of the Empire. Even the greatest king shall be brought asunder by the weakness of his public. Maestro took another crunch of the apple. His long hair was lank and untreated. His beard was covered in apple pieces.
"Ah, yes, a fellow scholar. 'Tis by Marcus Tweed, is it not?"
Malvanius raised an eyebrow, or raised nearly the whole eye socket at the man's understanding of the finer language of the past. "Yes," he conceded, "you are indeed knowledgeable. But how corrupt has that knowledge made you so far?" Maestro beamed at the man happily and produced a piece of paper that the taller of the men could read even the fine print upon from where he was standing. His eagle eyes and thick eyebrows also suggested as such. Maestro still replied, but he didn't know of the man's skill at far reading.
"Not that corrupt so far. I'm still only an apprentice wizard."
With that, the whole room gasped, including the barman. He dared to say,
"A wizard under my roof? I had no idea."
"Not much of one yet,"
Maestro argued, as if putting himself down was a good thing in this case.